That night, Michael Jackson broke protocol, ignored security, and created a moment that would become legendary. In front of 80,000 screaming fans at Wembley Stadium, the king of pop stopped mid-song, set down his microphone, and did something that would redefine what it means to be a superstar. But how did we get to this extraordinary moment? Let me take you back to July 16, 1988. It was supposed to be just another night on the Bad World Tour. Michael Jackson was at the peak of his career, fresh off the success of the best-selling album of all time. Wembley Stadium was sold out, with fans who had waited years to see the king of pop perform. The energy was electric, the stage was set, and everything was going according to plan. Until it wasn't. Earlier that day, backstage at Wembley, Michael was going through his usual pre-show routine. Vocal warm-ups, costume checks, final sound tests. His team was buzzing with the typical pre-concert energy, but Michael seemed unusually quiet, almost contemplative. His longtime security chief noticed something different about him that night. He kept asking about the audience, the security chief would later recall. Not about the numbers or the logistics, but about the people. Who they were, where they came from, what this night meant to them. Little did anyone know that Michael had received a letter that afternoon. A letter that would change everything about that performance. It was from a mother in London, whose 14-year-old daughter Emma was battling leukemia. The girl had been fighting for 2 years, and her greatest dream was to see Michael Jackson perform live. The family had scraped together every penny to buy tickets, knowing it might be Emma's last chance to see her hero. The letter wasn't a request for special treatment or backstage passes. It was simply a mother sharing her daughter's story, hoping that somehow, in some way, Michael would know that Emma would be there that night, in section 12, row 15, seat 8, wearing her favorite red dress and clutching a handmade sign that read, "Thank you for the music, Michael." Subscribe and comment now, because what happened next will show you why Michael Jackson wasn't just an entertainer, he was something much more. As the concert began, Michael delivered his usual electrifying performance. "Wanna Be Startin' Somethin' had the entire stadium on their feet. The Way You Make Me Feel had everyone singing along. But during Human Nature, something shifted. Michael's eyes began scanning the crowd more intently than usual, as if he was searching for something or someone. From his vantage point on stage, Michael spotted section 12. His incredible eyesight, honed by years of performing, allowed him to pick out individual faces even in the massive crowd. And there, in row 15, he saw her. Emma. The girl from the letter. She was singing along, tears streaming down her face, holding up her sign with hands that visibly shook from the emotion and the illness. But Michael noticed something else. As the song progressed, Emma's strength was clearly fading. The treatments had taken their toll, and even the excitement of the concert couldn't mask her exhaustion. She was leaning heavily on her mother, struggling to stay upright, but still singing every word. In the backstage area, Michael Jackson was making a decision that would shock everyone around him. During the instrumental break of Human Nature, Michael walked to the edge of the stage. His band, thinking this was part of the choreography, continued playing. The backup dancers maintained their positions. But Michael's security team immediately recognized something was different. This wasn't in the script. Michael raised his hand, signaling for the music to stop. Slowly, gradually, the instruments fell silent. The massive crowd, initially confused, began to quiet as well. 80,000 people holding their breath, wondering what was happening. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael's voice echoed through the stadium, softer than usual, more vulnerable. "Tonight, we have someone very special with us. Someone who reminds me why we're all here." He pointed directly to section 12. "Emma, I know you're there. I got your mother's letter." The crowd began to murmur, some confused, others starting to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented. In section 12, Emma's face went white with shock. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. But what happened next was the moment that nobody expected. The moment that would become legend. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, began walking down the stairs that led from the stage into the audience. Security tried to stop him, but he gently brushed them aside. 80,000 people watched in stunned silence as the world's biggest superstar walked through the crowd, heading directly toward a sick teenager. The path to Section 12 seemed to take forever. Michael moved through the audience like he was walking through water, each step deliberate and purposeful. Fans reached out to touch him, but he remained focused on his destination. The entire stadium had fallen into an almost reverent silence. When Michael reached Emma's row, she was sobbing uncontrollably. Her mother was crying. Her father was crying. Half the section was crying. Michael knelt down beside Emma's seat and took her hands in his. "Hello, beautiful," he said, his voice barely audible but somehow carrying through the silent stadium. "Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for fighting every day. You are the strongest person I know." Emma tried to speak but couldn't find the words. Michael reached into his jacket and pulled out his famous fedora, the one he'd worn on stage for countless performances. He placed it gently on Emma's head. "This is for you," he said. "For your courage. For your spirit. For showing all of us what real strength looks like." Then, Michael Jackson did something that broke every rule in the book. He lifted Emma from her seat and carried her toward the stage. Security was panicking. Tour managers were freaking out. Insurance companies would later have heart attacks. But Michael didn't care about any of that. He carried Emma up onto the Wembley stage and sat her down in a chair that materialized from somewhere in the wings. The crowd erupted in the loudest cheer of the night, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the stadium. Share this story and subscribe, because what happened next will make this night unforgettable. With Emma sitting beside him on stage, Michael picked up his microphone again. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "tonight we're all going to sing for Emma. We're going to sing about healing, about hope, about the power of music to bring us together." He began to sing "Heal the World" a cappella, his voice pure and unadorned. One by one, the 80,000 people in the audience joined in. Voices united in perfect harmony, singing not just for entertainment, but for something much more profound. They were singing for life, for hope, for a young girl who needed to know she wasn't alone. Emma, wearing Michael's fedora, sang along through her tears. Her voice was weak, but it was there, adding to the chorus of 80,000 voices. In that moment, she wasn't a cancer patient. She wasn't dying. She was exactly where she belonged, surrounded by love and music and the man who had changed her life forever. As the song ended, Michael knelt beside Emma once more. He whispered something in her ear that only she could hear. She nodded, smiled the biggest smile of her life, and hugged him with what little strength she had left. Michael helped Emma back to her parents, but she kept the fedora. As he returned to the stage, the ovation lasted for nearly 10 minutes. But this time, it wasn't just for Michael Jackson the performer. It was for Michael Jackson the human being. The concert continued, but everything had changed. The remaining songs felt different, more meaningful, more connected. When Michael performed "Man in the Mirror," the entire stadium sang along with a passion that went beyond fandom. They had witnessed something transformative, something that reminded them of the power of compassion. Emma's story didn't end that night. She fought her cancer for another 3 years, inspired by her moment on stage with Michael Jackson. She wore his fedora to every chemotherapy session, every doctor's appointment, every difficult day. When local news stations asked her about that night, she always said the same thing: "Michael showed me that I wasn't alone. He showed me that someone cared." Though Emma eventually lost her battle with cancer, her story lived on. Michael Jackson never spoke publicly about that night in detail, but those close to him said it changed him forever. He began incorporating more spontaneous moments of human connection into his performances. He started a foundation to support children battling serious illnesses. He made sure that every tour included opportunities to reach out to fans who needed hope. The fedora Emma wore that night was buried with her, at her family's request. But at the funeral, hundreds of people who had been at Wembley that night came to pay their respects. They had been changed by witnessing that moment of pure human compassion. Michael Jackson's legacy isn't just about his music, his dancing, or his record sales. It's about moments like these, moments when he chose to break every rule, ignore every protocol, and remind the world that we're all connected by our shared humanity. That night at Wembley, 80,000 people learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop everything and show someone you care. They learned that true greatness isn't measured by fame or fortune, but by the courage to be vulnerable, to be real, to be human. The ripple effects of that night continued for years. Security protocols at major concerts were rewritten to allow for what became known as compassion moments, planned opportunities for artists to interact with fans who needed special attention. Other major performers began incorporating similar gestures into their shows, but none ever matched the spontaneity and genuine emotion of Michael's moment with Emma. Years later, Emma's mother would establish the Emma's Fedora Foundation, in partnership with Michael Jackson's team. The foundation provided concert experiences for children battling life-threatening illnesses, ensuring that Emma's story would continue to bring hope to others. Michael personally funded the foundation's first 5 years of operation, though he insisted his contribution remain anonymous during his lifetime. The Wembley concert footage from that night became one of the most requested pieces of video in Michael Jackson's archives. Fans from around the world wrote letters asking to see that moment of pure humanity. Eventually, a short documentary was created featuring interviews with other concertgoers who were there that night, each describing how witnessing Michael's compassion changed their own approach to helping others. Emma's father, who had been skeptical of Michael Jackson before that night, became one of his most ardent defenders. People talked about Michael being strange, being different, he would say in interviews. But what I saw that night was someone who understood pain and chose to do something about it. That's not strange, that's heroic. The security chief who tried to stop Michael from entering the crowd later said it was the moment he understood the difference between protecting someone and enabling them to be their best self. I thought my job was to keep people away from Michael, he reflected. That night, I learned my job was to help Michael reach the people who needed him most. Michael himself rarely spoke about that specific night, but those close to him noticed changes in how he approached his craft afterward. He began requesting detailed information about his audiences before each show, not for security reasons, but to identify opportunities for connection. His dressing room rider started including provisions for impromptu gifts to fans, and his security detail was trained to facilitate rather than prevent meaningful interactions. The fedora that Emma wore became a symbol recognized worldwide. Replicas were sold at concerts with proceeds going to children's hospitals, and fans began bringing their own hats to shows, hoping to recreate that magical moment. Michael's costume designers started creating special fedoras specifically for giving away, each one blessed by Michael himself before the show. The band members from that night often spoke about how the energy on stage shifted permanently after Michael's gesture. "We weren't just musicians anymore," said the keyboard player. "We became part of something bigger, something healing. Every note we played after that moment felt different, more purposeful." The video footage of that night, when it was finally released years later, showed something remarkable in the crowd shots. While Michael was carrying Emma to the stage, cameras captured hundreds of audience members helping each other, lifting smaller fans so they could see better, sharing tissues with crying strangers, embracing people they'd never met. The compassion was contagious, spreading through the entire stadium like ripples in a pond. Emma's red dress from that night was later donated to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, displayed alongside Michael's sequined glove in an exhibit called Moments of Grace, When Music Heals. The placard read, "Sometimes the most important performance isn't on stage, but in the hearts of those who witness love in action." Medical professionals began studying what became known as the Wembley effect, how powerful emotional experiences could positively impact patients' treatment outcomes. Emma's oncology team documented her improved response to treatment in the months following the concert, leading to research into music therapy and the healing power of hope. In the immediate aftermath of that performance, Michael's team received over 50,000 letters from fans sharing their own stories of struggle and survival. Each letter was read, and Michael personally responded to hundreds of them. His assistant later revealed that he would often spend hours after concerts writing notes to fans who had reached out, turning what should have been rest time into moments of continued connection and care. In his final interviews, when asked about his proudest moments, Michael often mentioned connections with individual fans rather than record sales or awards. "The music is just the beginning," he would say. "It's what happens between people, heart to heart, that really matters. That's where the real magic lives." If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of compassion. Subscribe to hear more stories about the moments that define us as human beings. Because in the end, that's what Michael Jackson's greatest gift was, not just entertaining us, but reminding us of who we could be at our very best.